Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. If you are here, it means you are about to listen to the CircleCI product roadmap, where we'll be talking about all the latest and greatest changes in CircleCI product experience and what's coming now, next, and future. In a second, I'm going to be passing over to our members of our amazing product team. But before we do that, we're just going to go through some few quick reminders. So everyone that's on the line, all attendees, you are muted right now, but if you have any questions, you can pop them into the Zoom chat and we'll cover that during the Q&A time. And also many thanks to all the folks that pre-submitted questions as well. Also, while we're going to be diving into some specific areas of the product experience today, you can get a look at the full view of the product CircleCI roadmap at the link below. And also you can keep up to date on all the changes coming thick and fast with the changelog at the link there too. So with that, I will pass it over to Akar to take it away.
Hello, everybody. My name is Akar Shroff. I'm VP of Product here at CircleCI. I have a great set of product managers who will introduce themselves when they get to their section here to talk about all the things that we're building and all the things we're trying to do to make developers' lives easier. But one thing I want to make sure that I definitely tell you all is that we love receiving product feedback. We actually have a feedback email alias that goes to the product team as well as some of our engineering leaders. So please, if you've got feedback, don't hesitate to shoot us an email, and we'll hopefully respond. So next slide, please. So today we're going to talk a bit about the mission of CircleCI. I'll go through kind of how we're thinking about the problems we're trying to solve for developers. Then we'll have Sebastian talk about what that means for continuous integration. We'll have Alexa talk a little bit about deploy and release, and then we'll have Benny finish it up with AI and all the lovely stuff that's coming with LLMOps. Next slide. So at CircleCI, our mission is to manage and validate all the things that can impact a software team's ability to deliver value to their customer. Our goal is really to give time back to software teams so that they can innovate on the problem space. And so change and validating change is the thing that we care most deeply about. Next slide. And so historically, when we've talked about change, it's been about the code that the team is changing, right? It's been tied to essentially the VCS. And really, when we're thinking about it from a CI/CD perspective, we're really thinking about change from a build, test, and deploy perspective. Next slide. However, kind of over the last decade, 2 decades, applications have gone cloud native. The push for software teams has been to increase velocity, and teams have started to adopt a lot of things to help support that velocity. Code that the team writes is only one piece of the entire application puzzle. The other things could be, teams using external libraries, images, different data models, APIs, other projects to help them build what they're trying to get built so that they can deliver value to their customers. And so as these things change, they end up impacting, obviously, the software teams and the end user. And a lot of it becomes shouldered by the software developers who are kind of helping to manage all the things that are happening. Next slide. And so as we've gotten further along, the responsibility now gets pulled into the software team, right? They're responsible for what runs in production, how it runs. They hold the pager at the end of the day. And so they have to have confidence in the things that they're delivering more and more. Next slide. And as things get more complex, one of the areas that we know that that developers struggle with is just getting feedback a lot quicker, right? Committing a change, having it go through all the testing cycles, getting it kind of to the point where things are okay, getting feedback takes a long time. And so as we look at the things that we're trying to do, one of the areas we're focused on is helping developers get feedback a lot quicker. Next slide. And now with kind of generative AI, unsurprisingly, the problem has gotten a lot more complex. It's added a new layer into what developers are taking responsibility for and needing to kind of manage. The problem now isn't just testing deterministic outcomes. You're now having to test and validate probabilistic outcomes, a lot of which you need to test and validate in production. And when the behavior of the application changes, the behavior of the model changes, the developer now needs to be responsible for kind of reacting to that. So a lot more is now on the shoulder of developers than just security, testing, code, AI, APIs, things like that. So next slide. And so the way we're thinking about the problems and what comes next is across kind of these three areas. How do we continue to improve our CI experience? How do we introduce kind of improvements from a security perspective, stability perspective, performance perspective? And really, how do we make sure that we are improving developer productivity and giving time back to the developers? From a deploy and release perspective, we're really focused on building tools and giving developers the confidence that whatever they end up releasing, they can be confident that the behavior of that will continue to work as they so expect. And if it doesn't, it can automatically kind of revert back to the last good change. And then from an AI perspective, really our focus here is like kind of twofold. One is on the CI front, are there things we can be doing to improve the lives of developers and their productivity using kind of LLMs, using machine learning models? But on this front, we're really focused on as developers get to the next phase, as they start building tools and applications that are using machine learning models, that are using LLMs, that are relying on generative AI to kind of build out their features and functionality for their end users. What are the tools that we can give them to confidently deliver value to their customers? And so as you kind of look and listen to the team and them talk about what we're building, these are the three lenses that we're focused on. And now I will hand it over to Sebastian to talk about continuous integration.
Thank you, Akar. Hey, everyone. Good to see everyone. My name is Sebastian, product manager here at CircleCI. Excited to talk about kind of our bread and butter, right? CircleCI, continuous integration. This is the continuous integration theme of how we're focusing on evolving kind of the core part of our platform, all about developer efficiency and how do we get you as successful as possible with using, the day-to-day kind of core part of our platform when it comes to CI. So you can go to the next slide. I got a couple slides here. I want to spend a few minutes just talking about a few things that shipped recently, things that we're hearing really good feedback on, we're really excited about. And then I have another slide that talks about going forward, kind of what are we thinking about, what's top of mind over the next few months within this continuous integration theme. So like I mentioned, in terms of what shipped recently, there's three things I want to touch on. On the left-hand side, the first one is functionality that we're calling config test run, that we're hearing really great feedback from users so far in terms of kind of solving a really acute pain point. So before I talk about kind of what the feature and functionality is, I want to take a step back, explain the problem that we're trying to solve there. So typically, most people's interaction with CI is you sign up for a CircleCI, you set up the project, you set up the YAML configuration file, which are the instructions that basically tell us what to do when you're running your pipeline. And then you kind of just forget about it. For the most part, you're not changing that configuration file too much. But there are occasions when you want to make changes to that YAML configuration file. For example, you got a new repo that you want to add a new project on CircleCI and start building and validating. Or, there's a new feature that CircleCI released. A lot of our features are defined in configuration files. You want to take advantage of that feature to make your developers kind of optimize the pipeline, make them more efficient. Or you got an existing workflow and let's say you want to add something to it, right? Like you've got build, test, deploy. You want to make sure there's a lint job or a lint step that is happening as part of every single workflow. That requires making modifications to the configuration file. So even though it doesn't happen a ton, there are examples of times when you got to do it. And historically, there hasn't been a great tool on the market or any kind of solution on the market that makes that process easy. Typically what we see and what I hear from users and what I've experienced myself is that there's a bunch of pain that goes into writing that configuration file, editing that configuration file, iterating on that config file. It usually looks something like, okay, pull it up in my IDE, make a change, read some docs, try to figure it out, squint at it, be like, okay, is that the right syntax? Push that commit to the repo, go to CircleCI, wait for the workflow to run. Oh, I had a syntax error, come back to the IDE, make another change, push again, come back, and then just trial and error basically over and over and over again. And that workflow it could run 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes before you actually get signal on whether or not that change worked. And that's a really painful and long feedback cycle. So config test run, what we've done is we've tried to solve both of those pain points, right? So both the pollution of the commit history where you're just pushing random stuff and you don't even know if it works or not, and the long feedback cycle that comes from having to wait for the entire workflow to run to see whether or not your config changes actually worked. Config test run lets you, within CircleCI's VS Code extension, take the local version of the configuration file that you have on your machine. And on the left-hand side of the VS Code extension, you can basically say, run the workflow basically with my local config. So you don't have to push stuff that you don't know whether it works or not. You can make really fast edits with just the local unversioned config that's on your machine. And on top of that, you can say, hey, I'm only making these micro edits to the test job out of the build, test, deploy workflow. Checkbox, only run the test job, for example. So a workflow that might take 15 minutes to run, maybe the test is 5 of those minutes. You get feedback in 5 minutes as opposed to 15 minutes because you're only making edits to the test job and you only have to run the test job. So it kind of solves, it's best of both worlds where it solves both of those pain points. Instead of having to go through and pollute your repo with all these commits that you don't know if it's even going to work or not, and wait for a really long time to get any feedback, you get fast feedback. You only have to run the things that really matter to you, and you can keep things local and make those changes before you actually have to push anything to your repo. So from what we've heard from users so far, it really solves that pain point, both of those pain points very well. So we're really excited about config test run and seeing where it goes from here. The second thing on this list is a similar story to the first in that, we recognize that most people aren't spending their day-to-day updating configuration files. We don't want to put that burden on you, right? So for example, my team last year launched a feature that is defined in your configuration file called rerun failed tests. To take advantage of it, you got to go and rework your config to basically say, hey, I want to basically use this new command. I got to use this new syntax. You got to make it work with your test runner, okay? But that's work that you're adding to your team, to your developers. You got to prioritize it against the rest of your work to actually build your business. And so what we want to do is basically take that burden off of you. And we want to be in the position where we can recognize that you, as your team, you're running tests. Probably we can see whether or not you have flaky tests, which the feature helps you basically rerun only the flaky tests as opposed to all tests when you run into a flaky test. We recognize that you've got flaky tests. We recognize that you would benefit from this feature. We'll go and take your configuration file. We'll make the modifications ourselves, and we will basically create a new branch in your repository with the modified configuration file and open up a pull request to merge the modified configuration file to your default branch. So all you have to do to take advantage of that functionality, you don't have to go and read the docs and spend a bunch of time trying to figure out how to actually use the feature. You don't have to prioritize that work against your other work, all those chores and stuff. You can just, with one click of a button, merge the pull request if everything looks okay. And now you and your team get the benefit of the config feature and functionality without any of the work. And if you don't want to use it, like decline the pull request. Very simple, right? So that's the second thing on this list, which we've heard really good feedback from users so far in terms of automatically recommending and doing the work for users to say, hey, another great example, right? CPU and RAM utilization. Like I hear from users all the time, I want better monitoring to be able to alert on the CPU and RAM utilization. We can do that, or we can monitor that for you. And if we see that, hey, your CPU is pegged at 100% for 6 out of the past 8 runs, we'll go and modify the config and propose a change to use a larger resource class. Or what we're doing right now is even propose a smaller resource class if you're not utilizing all of the CPU and RAM utilization. Save you a few dollars every month, right? And so the idea of the automatic recommendations is basically take the burden off of you as a developer or the platform team and let us basically do the hard work of analyzing the usage and understanding when you can take advantage of different config functionality to optimize your pipeline and stay as optimal as possible. And for you, all you have to do is either say, yes, I want to use this recommended new approach, or no, merge, and now you're taking advantage of it. So that's another one where we're getting really great feedback from users, and we're excited to continue to evolve that for different types of recommendations over the next few months. The last item on this list is you heard Akar talk about security, right? Security is incredibly top of mind for us. On CircleCI, the way that we let users basically manage environment variables across the entire organization, across many projects, is through something called contexts. Contexts have been very useful for customers, but historically, the only way to say and pick and choose, like I want this context to be used in this occasion, but not in that occasion, is by some pretty blunt tools, right? Either you use something called security groups, which is say only these people can use this context, or you say only these projects can use these contexts. But we've heard from users, I need more flexibility. I need more granularity to be able to say when context can or cannot be used, so that certain environment variables, certain credentials and secrets, you've got more control over the secrets that you're using on CircleCI in your pipeline. So what we've launched is something that we're calling expression-based context restrictions, which aim to give you, a ton of flexibility around how you can manage the usage of those of how those contexts actually get used. And the way it works is, when you actually run a pipeline, right? We receive a webhook from GitHub or the VCS, right? GitLab, Bitbucket, whatever it may be. As part of that webhook, we get a bunch of metadata around the push event, right? That commit. So we may know like the author, for example, or the branch or other type of information. We take that metadata and we make it available to you as part of variables to some extent when that pipeline is running. And what you can now do is take those variables and use them to add rules to the usage of given context. So for example, if you have a context that you only want to be able to be used when the pipeline is running on the main branch, for example, what you can do now is you can take that context, add a rule that has a regular expression that says, only let this context be used if pipeline.get.branch, I don't know if that's the precise syntax, but something like that, pipeline.get.branch equals main. And now when we are trying to run a pipeline, what we'll do, and that uses that context, what we'll do is we'll say, well, is the branch main? If yes, okay, cool, you can use the context. If not, no, you can't use the context. So it gives you as the user a ton more flexibility and granularity, in addition to the project restrictions that we have, even more information to be able to say, hey, I only want this author, I only want this branch to be able to use this thing, to use this context. And it really provides a ton of flexibility out of the box. So those are the things that launched recently. We're really excited about. You can go to the next slide. Just a couple more minutes here in terms of what's coming next. So the three kind of big pillars that are top of mind within this continuous integration theme. Developer efficiency is the first. The first two items on the previous slide that we talked about were all about developer efficiency, right? Automatic recommendations so that you can run faster as a team on CircleCI, and the config test run also helps you, iterate on your config faster. Config test run actually is interesting because we actually think that pattern doesn't stop at the configuration file, at the YAML CircleCI configuration file. That pattern could be extended to any local changes that you have within your on your local machine, basically, right? So what we're looking at is basically saying, in addition to configuration files, any sort of local changes that you've made that you haven't necessarily pushed yet, is there a way? How can we let you basically validate what that's going to look like in CI and give you that flexibility to say, oh, I'm only making changes to these tests, for example, only run the test job. So give you that same flexibility and that same tight feedback cycle that config test run gives you, but extended for any local changes, not just for changes to your configuration file. So we get, make your inner loop even faster. The second thing on developer efficiency that we're looking at is less around, when the pipeline is running, but more around how can we enable you when you're setting up projects to be as quick as possible. So orbs are a really great solution for reusing config on CircleCI, but they have their limitations, right? So we're looking at other ways to solve those limitations that help you not have to repeat yourself when you're writing config, right? Let you basically say, I want to reuse config, but in an effective and efficient way. Additionally, templatizing, right? The ability to say, this is the golden path that I want for my team when they're setting up a new project. I want this config file to be the starter config, and I want these different settings to be enabled. how can we enable sort of that pipeline or project templating experience to be as smooth and extensible as possible. So that's developer efficiency. In the middle, just like how we talked about expression-based context restrictions, security remains top of mind. I think the expression-based context restrictions is one example. Continuing to evolve that experience and that functionality will help us with, or will help our users with their access and controls, and being able to kind of be even more flexible and granular on that. The fourth bullet on there, I think, is really interesting, where we hear from users all the time. We give that, we have functionality on CircleCI that lets you basically say, if you've got a firewall in your own environment and you want to protect and make sure that traffic that's coming from CircleCI's environment into your firewall, you can use the IP ranges feature that lets you basically open up your firewall to a fixed set of IPs, add those to your allow list, and now you know that traffic that's coming from CircleCI to behind your firewall is only going to come from CircleCI. We have plenty of users that say, I need like a level above that, right? Like I need something even more strict. So if that sounds like a use case that resonates with you, definitely reach out to us, because we've got a solution in mind that we'd love to get feedback on in terms of how we can basically make sure that site-to-site connectivity is even more kind of buttoned up for a specific user, a specific organization, a specific customer. And then the last thing on this slide is all about simplifying how you manage CircleCI at scale, right? So if you're an organization, you're a platform team that's managing CircleCI for 100, 500, 1,000 developers within your team and your company, we want to make sure that experience is just as good as if you're a 5-person developer team, right? And getting a 5-person developer team getting started on CircleCI. Different problem statements, different needs when it comes to managing, 100, 1,000, 100 and 1,000 developers. So what's really top of mind for us is integration with identity providers. So the ability to say, hey, I want to use Okta, for example, or other sort of common identity providers for my user management. That's a big one that's being worked on right now. Also, robust APIs to be able to create, modify, edit primitives on CircleCI. So whether that's your project creation, your config creation, whatever it is, give you as a platform team kind of the keys to be able to say, I can enable my developers to have a turnkey solution when using CircleCI. All they have to worry about when they want to use a new project is click one button. But me as the platform team, I've got all the knobs basically to be able to say programmatically, this is what I want to have happen, and sort of sequence the automation in that way. So over the next few months, you'll see more on that front as well. And that's all I got. That's continuous integration. So if you have any questions, like I said, reach out, Sebastian at CircleCI, or feedback@circleci.com. With that, I will hand it off to Alexa.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexa Ziza-Sloper, and I am product manager here in the deploy and release space at CircleCI. So next slide. The most important thing I want to note here for deploy and release is that a few months ago, we launched our release agent after being in open preview for a few months. And over the course of the open preview, and since we've launched, we've received a lot of really great feedback from our customers around what's working well for them and what challenges they've faced. And so over the course of the last few months, we have addressed some of those challenges that have been brought up with us. Starting with getting set up faster. So we definitely heard from users that it could be challenging to understand exactly where I am in the setup process, what is needed from me. There were some access restrictions. And so over the last few weeks and months, we have gone and improved that experience, simplified some of the steps, and introduced a new in-app experience that really guides you through that process, allows you to know what is left in the setup process for you. And if you have to step away, it takes note of where you're at in that process. So when you come right back to it, there's no confusion there. And really, we're wanting to help customers get that first component set up and get their first release out the door much more quickly. The second thing we heard from customers is how important it is to be able to track what is released into what environment. So we've introduced the concept of environments into the release portfolio. And so now you can look at a single environment view, see what version of all your services are live in that environment, Or if you're trying to track a change within a single service, you can look at that view and see what version of that component is live in each environment, so you know kind of where that change is through your process. And then lastly, we've been initially focused on releasing easily into Kubernetes clusters and getting that visibility and responding quickly to incidents. But we also recently introduced support for deploying models into AWS SageMaker. So this is trying to give a broader sense of what can be accomplished within the deploy and release functionality on the platform. Next slide. When we look at what is ahead, I like to break this down into kind of three main themes. The first of which is giving customers better end-to-end visibility. So right now, we provide a way for customers to see what has been released recently, take actions on those releases, especially, as I said, in response to an incident, decrease your mean time to recovery by being able to roll back quickly via the UI to a stable version. Scale pods up and down, restart your pods. But what we've heard is that it can be challenging to understand kind of how individual changes get released to production. So we are working on that end-to-end visibility to help customers trace a change all the way from that code commit through when it's released to production. Second part is actually something that's really opening the door, new functionality across the entire platform, so that customers can better leverage a better experience. And we're calling these job types. The first job type that we are introducing is a release job type. We are also improving our existing approval job type. And so with the combination of those, users will be able to build true CD workflows that orchestrate changes all the way through their system. You can go in and manually promote a change from one environment to the next. And like I said, this is just the first couple iterations of this concept of job types that we are introducing on the platform, really to let you kind of customize your workflows to accomplish the specific goals that you're looking to accomplish. And then finally, I mentioned, we support Kubernetes. We introduced support recently for AWS SageMaker, but we really want to broaden our ability to support what other targets customers are deploying to, what other tooling they're using. And we also understand that not everyone has Kubernetes, and installing tools into a Kubernetes cluster can be challenging. So we are exploring ways to make it easier for anyone, regardless of what technology you're using, to take advantage of releases and get value out of it. So if you have, if you're not using Kubernetes, you're not using AWS SageMaker, if there's other targets or other tools you'd like us to target, please do send us that feedback at CircleCI.com email. We'd love to hear from you. And that is it for me. So I will pass it along to Benny.
Hi, everyone. My name is Benny. I'm a product manager here at CircleCI, and I'm here to talk about what we're doing to adapt to this new world where AI is everywhere. Next slide. So obviously, Akar and Sebastian explained how we inside CircleCI are leveraging AI ourselves to improve our product offering, to create features that improve developer productivity and that let us give faster feedback to users. But here, really, I want to talk about how we're thinking about those developers who are themselves building applications or features that are based on artificial intelligence. So we know that virtually every company today is including some form of AI in their product, or they're experimenting with it, or at the very least they want to. And so what we've been trying to understand in the past few months is, how does the software development cycle change when you're incorporating AI in your application, if it changes at all? What are the new tools that teams use? How does their day-to-day change? Does testing mean the same thing? How do best practices evolve? And so on. And the most important differences that we're seeing are three. So first, we see that the stack of tools used to build applications with AI is really very large, very diversified, and not well integrated, at least not yet. We've got a multitude of model providers. We've got dataset registries, prompt managers, different types of ways of storing data, like vector databases and like knowledge stores, basically experimentation platforms. We've got evaluation platforms, observability platforms, all specific to LLMs, for example. And a change in any of these places can impact the behavior of an application. So a change in my vector store might drive a change in my application behavior, and a user might see a change in functionality. So we have lots of moving parts that live in different places. And even if the VCS is still the center of the developer world, we need to keep into account all of these tools that exist around it as well. The second difference that we are seeing is that testing application behavior is really not as easy when it comes to AI, and in particular with generative AI. Akar mentioned this before, but typically with traditional software, testing is deterministic. We can count on that. So that allows us to have clearly defined sets of test cases that cover all combinations of business logic that we need to test. Now, not everybody might write all possible combinations, but this is possible. Instead, with generative AI, the same input given to a model might give us a very different output, or at least slightly different output. And this means that we can no longer count on determinism. And depending on the use case, it can also be very difficult to express in a test form what a single test case is, whether it's right or it's wrong, or somewhere in between. And on top of this, we know that running functions that call on LLMs is much slower and more expensive than running like very, very large test cases for standard tests. The third difference that we're seeing and hearing from customers, and this one is specifically from customers who are building their own machine learning models in-house, is that they have some practical requirements that typically normal classic CI doesn't offer today. So they need access to larger resource classes, more memory, including GPU. They need CI to be performant even when dealing with much, much larger images. Typically, models are very large and they take a lot longer to load, obviously, so they have very different caching needs. And in some cases, they need jobs to run a lot longer than what a typical job in CI usually runs for. Right, next slide. So what's on the roadmap to address changes in these three areas? First, we plan on building much better first-party integration with all of the tools that are now part of the stack for an engineer building with AI. And in particular, we think it's really important that customers can trigger CI pipelines based on change that is happening anywhere. We're doing this today with a feature called inbound webhooks, a feature that basically lets CircleCI listen to events from any external system and trigger pipelines on these events. So when your dataset or your model changes and you want to trigger tests and prepare your deployment scenario, you can create a path of full automation to do all of this without any manual actions. This feature today we call it generic webhooks. It's available in preview for customers that are integrated with GitHub app. And we're getting good feedback from users about it. And we are learning something about the use cases that they're using it for. So we plan to expand it and make it available to all customers in the future. And we also plan on offering provider-specific webhooks for the most popular AI and LLM platforms, so that our system will be able to recognize the payload shape from each provider and make it very easy to create these fully automated validation systems. Second, we think it's important to keep helping customers to deploy their features to production with confidence. And so we are focusing on testing and evaluations a lot, evaluations for LLMs use cases. So what we're doing here is creating deeper integrations with evaluation platforms. So for example, tools like Braintrust and Langsmith. We are trying to make the experience of adding evaluation to your flow, to your workflows easier, and make it easier as well to surface the results and feedback within CircleCI. We're also adapting our product to provide probabilistic feedback instead of deterministic one, which means not only showing results as a pass or a fail, a red or green, but showing a more nuanced result and letting users set thresholds above or below which they want to have a manual review, for example. And third, we plan to connect to LLM-specific observability tools so that production data can be used to continuously improve the dataset of evaluation. And finally, to cater to those that are building their own machine learning models or fine-tuning large language models, we're introducing new GPU resource classes. We're introducing higher concurrency limits, increasing the maximum duration of jobs, and improving our caching and introducing what we're calling warm instances. Right, I'm going to pass it back to Akar for a conclusion. Thanks.
Thank you, Benny. Thank you, everybody. So just a heads up, we have a lot more coming in 2024. We're super excited about all the things we're going to be doing to help developers take advantage of not only the CircleCI platform, but improve their day-to-day lives. So keep in tune with our product roadmap, keep in tune with our changelog as we consistently continue to improve our experience there. The other point is we plan on having these webinars every quarter or so. So this is our summer one. We'll be having one in the fall too. So next slide. If you've got feedback, again, on the product roadmap, if you got feedback on kind of some features or functionality, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're super excited to hear from you and understand the challenges that you're dealing with and hopefully help you solve some big problems. With that, I think we'll open it up for some questions.
Fantastic. And yeah, great job, everyone. This was great to hear it all come together. So I think we can start with one quick one to start things off. There was a question in the chat about getting the content that we just read through after the event. So we are recording this session, and the plan is to make sure that this recording is available on YouTube, so you can go back and look through some of the content that we talked about. And again, like Akar just mentioned, if there is anything that you want to follow up on specifically, great to check out feedback@circleci.com. Also, we have our Canny request forum, or if you want to just join the conversation and the community on Discuss at CircleCI as well. So plenty of ways to get in touch. So with that one out of the way, I think there was a question in chat as well that just came in for either Sebastian or Benny. It was a question about our config test run and ways that it could be used. Who wants to take that one? Looks like Benny's off mute.
Yeah, I can take it. So the question was whether it works when using private orbs. Yes, it does. So I just want to clarify that the feature is not running your workflows locally on your machine. It's still running workflows on the cloud on CircleCI. The difference is that it's taking your local version of configuration. So you can iterate as much as you want on your config.yaml file and keep testing only the specific changes that you want. So if you're making changes to your test job, you can only run your test job instead of having to run the entire workflow. But everything is still running on the cloud, which means that things like private orbs shouldn't pose a problem. The one limitation, or like one important limitation, is that right now we don't support continuation configs, what we call dynamic config as well. So if you're using dynamic configuration, it's not available yet.
Excellent, thank you. So now we I still have time for anyone who's on the line who wants to submit some more questions as we go. But what I'll do now is just go back to some of the pre-submitted questions that we had ahead of time. And one maybe for Akar to answer is we were wondering if there's going to be any updates related to server that you could share.
Yeah, I mean, I think the the idea that we have for Server is that we want to give organizations who are in situations where they have got air gap experiences or need to be in a kind of fully controlled environment, the opportunity to continue having a great CI platform. And so our goal there is to continue improving it with, you know, new features, but our hope is, and kind of what we've been hearing from our customer base right now is that on Server, what they want is just incredible stability and incredible visibility into what changes in the system. And so as part of that, what we're doing is providing a much more detailed change log for Server customers, as well as trying to give them trying to improve the stability so that every upgrade they can have confidence that everything's going to run as it does. The biggest challenge with Server is everybody obviously configures it within their own kind of specific set of standards. And so making sure that an upgrade that happens 2 or 3 releases down can actually confidently be installed is something that we want to make sure happens. So that's the focus area on Server. I think a new question came in on config test runs.
All right, let's go to that one. Okay, if I use config test run, can I look at any given run and know what the config file contained for that particular run?
Yes, if from the pipelines page you click on like look at the config for this run, you see the correct config.
Excellent. Excellent. So this might be one that going back to some of the pre-submitted questions that might just apply for across the board. But I think particularly for Sebastian, for the items that you mentioned that are released, are they available on all plan types or are they specific to certain plan types?
Yeah, so config test run, the automatic recommendations, and expression-based context restrictions available to all plans. No restrictions from a plan type perspective. A little bit of a nuance with the first one, config test run, that I think Benny mentioned. Currently have kind of 2 ways that you can integrate with GitHub today. We have most of our users use what we call a GitHub OAuth app integration. New users starting around September 2023 started using GitHub app integration, which is a newer version. The functionality for config test run today only available for users, which most of our users are using the GitHub OAuth app integration, not quite yet available for the GitHub app. I know a little confusing with the terminology, but not yet available for GitHub app integration. So that's the only nuance I would mention. Other than that, though, no restrictions from a plan type perspective.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thanks for that, Sebastian. And looks like the crowd's getting warmed up, so we just got another couple of questions coming in. So the first one was about releases, so which I think that will be one for Alexa. So releases becomes more visible for all deployment types. Any date when we can expect it?
I don't have a timeline right now for that. We are looking into it right now, but should be coming up soon. And like I said, please do reach out if there, we're working on kind of having a tech agnostic solution, but if there are any specific technologies you'd also like us to kind of dig deeper into, provide deeper functionality or tools that you'd like us to integrate with, please do reach out to that feedback email address and let us know.
Right, and that is actually a really good segue because the next question was we wanted to just get that email address shared again. So I think we have it on the slide here. So it's feedback@circleci.com. And we'll see if someone can post that in the chat as well. So to make sure that we can get all your thoughts collected. And I'm just going to leave it a few more seconds, but I think we've run through all of the questions that we had submitted before and during. So unless now there's anything else, I think we're just going to wrap it up and say really big thanks to everyone that attended today or will listen back later to the call. And also big round of applause for all of our presenters that we had on the call today. It's been great chatting with you for the summer session. And like Car says, we'll look forward to doing this again in the fall. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.